I'm Rick Lawrence from the Royal Albert Memorial Museum and Art Gallery, which is a regional museum in Exeter. And like many museums of our size, we spent considerable time and effort getting our collections online. We started off in 2008 with, I think the technical term is a bit of a damp squib. And then in 2012, funded with major partner museum funding, we had another go, which was much more successful. And we didn't just develop a website for our own museum, but having the ambition of the naive, we developed this creature, Southwest Collections Explorer. Also realized there are other, even smaller museums than us who might want to get their collections online. And as part of the general idea behind Arts Council England funding for collections to improve access to collections, it seemed a really good idea to make something that's inclusive and that other collections can join in with. So if you go to the unbridled excitement that is Southwest Collections Explorer, you will find not only our collection is there, but also the Museum of Somerset. And when I get back to work on Monday, I'll be frowning at the data from the Devon Museums Group, which are a group of 70 small museums, which vary in size from a quite big one at Barnstable, which I can really recommend visiting, to really small ones run by a volunteer and a Jack Russell. Now, somebody mentioned some of these museums are really tiny. One of the common threads with getting all of these collections on is we're not just going for the scoop up your collections data and dump it on the web. We're encouraging both our own staff and others to always make sure any object on there has a nice photo so people can see what it is and do anything with it they may wish to do, which is where we start joining up with our friends at Daisi. And also, I encourage my curatorial chums to write a nice plain English description for it as well. The plainness of the English varies a bit, as we're very big on create once, publish anywhere. So if it's a description written for an article, it may be a bit more academic, and it may sometimes just be, I'm giving away a trade secret here, a copy of a label from the gallery. We are that shallow. But we do try and aim for a nice plain English description. So some of the other things we've done, we had to redo the website in 2016 because our current developer was giving up the website business. So we took the opportunity to go to open source and WordPress it, and we had lots of very good ideas that didn't quite work as well as we hoped. And if anybody's interested in talking about running WordPress with subsites and museums data, do call me at some point today. Some of the other things we've put in to make it more friendly to people wanting to use data, whether ours or any of the other people joining in with us. We've redeveloped the API. We've also, just looking over my shoulder to make sure it's there and live, I've been on holiday for a fortnight. So yes, we've got a thing called Visitor Collections, effectively digital scrapbook. You can create your own collections from across all of the contributing museums. And this is really important from a visitor point of view. That if you had to go down into each collection to gather stuff up, you'd probably lose the will to live. Whereas making it visitor friendly, visitor first, you can just add to your collection from anywhere in the website. At least that's the theory. If anybody finds otherwise, please let me know, as it is very, very new, this. Something else we put in for the research audience, if you're a researcher and want to gather stuff up and keep it secret, you can do so. And finally, of course, you can download stuff in our old friend, an Excel spreadsheet. If you want to keep the data or do something interesting with it, have a link to images. Some mentioning images, people have already spoken about the importance of a nice clear image, being able to download it and use it, and we aim to do that. But some people are better at doing that than others. So there are the odd blanks in there, which I hope will get filled in. Also, when we redid it, we've given different collections the opportunity to link through to print sales websites, because like all museums, we're expected to generate income, and also to other interesting sites like Sketchfab for 3D stuff, or any other thing that might be useful. Also can link through to YouTube as well. So we've created all this lovely digital collections wonderfulness, but really the whole point of giving access to collections is for people to use it. And so this is where, with a bit more of a wonderful museum partnership, major partner museum funding, we're able to work with Daisi and start getting young people getting digitally creative with our collections material. So it's over to Ruth.
Over to me. Okay. Okay. Feeling very undigital. So Daisi, I'm afraid, doesn't stand for anything digital. It stands for Devon Arts in Schools Initiative. And we stopped calling ourselves Devon Arts in Schools Initiative because we stopped working only with schools. So we're now called Daisi. But we are an arts education partnership. So we work with young people and the arts. And the aim is to inspire young people's learning through cultural and artistic education. So just to give you a bit of context, we are a charity. We were formed out of about 20 years ago by school governors and teachers and artists worrying about the lack of arts opportunities within the curriculum. So Daisi was formed to be trying to kind of link those things up and bring professional artists and creative opportunities to young people. So we have a group of registered artists on our books who can go and work with young people, and they're registered and they have CRB checks and all those kind of things, and we looked at their work and know that it is of sufficient quality that we can trust them to work with young people. That's also just to give you a sense of scale. We work with about 7,000 young people every year. So the project that we're doing with Rick is called Museum Machina, and it's working with RAMM and with Plymouth City Museum and Art Gallery. And it's about using museum collections as an inspiration source for young people's digital artwork, so creative artwork. And it's about it being young people led, so that we're trying to get young people to work out what they want to do in terms of digital creativity, rather than deciding this is what is in the curriculum and therefore what you need to do. So it's running alongside a larger project that we're doing, which is funded by Arts Council, which is about young people-led digital art, but without the museum's element. So we've kind of come together to do a sort of bigger project that's got this idea about young people-led digital art, but using museum objects as well. So it involves artists, young people, teachers, youth leaders, and partners that are regional to us. So IDAT, which is, I don't know if any of you know, based at Plymouth. I'm not sure exactly what IDAT stands for, actually. But they are very cutting edge in terms of digital technologies and industry. SpaceX, which is a contemporary art space in Exeter. Exeter Phoenix, which is a arts centre, which does a lot of digital work. And one of our partner schools, which is very sort of at the forefront of teaching good creative digital arts. And we're looking at the sorts of things we're talking about are digital technology and processes, but in conjunction with traditional creative media, so painting, printing, sculpture. We're not saying that all the work that needs to be produced has to be screen-based, it has to be only digital. But it's about an interesting interplay between the digital technologies that we use and that young people use on their smartphones and the apps and those traditional media. And it's also, we would like to look at things about coding and data and work that's implemented by that sort of coding and things, the sort of Raspberry Pi stuff that we were hearing about earlier. So that's the sort of area we're talking about. The outcomes, the aims of the project are about building relationships between key partners in the region and young people and artists and people like the museum, so to sort of bring a sort of community of interest together to look at this subject. And these are some of the artists that's worked on our first phase. We want young people to feel that they have a sort of voice in how they make work and how they use technology creatively, especially within the classroom and especially within the curriculum. There's a bit of a divide traditionally between art as it's seen at school and contemporary art outside the classroom. There is sort of become a bit of a sort of schism between the kind of multi-platform, very genre fluid, digital, contemporary work that you see in galleries and museums and in the world outside, and then this art as seen in school, which does tend to be quite traditional media based, except when you look at photography, which is not like that at all. But it was about kind of trying to bring these things together, so that the idea around things like smartphones, which are often banished in schools, put at the bottom of the bag, must be switched off. They're dangerous technology, and in some ways they are, but they can be interesting creative tools. And if young people can learn to use them not as consumers and to be sort of, they become part of the product, but to use their creativity, to use them as a tool, they can be a much more powerful part of their creative world. So there's something about upskilling young people, both within their work at school, but in terms of thinking about progression pathways into creative industries. There's a lot of fear amongst teachers and school staff around digital technology. We get a lot of phone calls from schools knowing that they want to do some digital art, but having absolutely no idea what that means. And so they sort of phone in a bit of a panic saying, you know, we have this digital literacy across our curriculum, but what does that mean in terms of creativity? How can we make digital art that looks like this? So it's about raising that kind of confidence to know what it means and how you can do it. And these are some sort of outcomes about moving towards the future, having something that we can offer to schools and something that museums can offer to schools and something that you can talk about in the future as something, we know what you can do, you could try this and this will work. So the model has got some R&D with artists, some work with a small group of young people, which was about artists working very closely with 15 young people to look at what the young people were interested in and developing their own work, with some museum objects there, a handling collection there as the source for the creative work, and then some test workshops in schools, some professional development, some wider workshops with a much larger group of settings, and then a festival and an exhibition. We're only a small way through that process, I have to say. We've only done the first few workshops, so this is very much work in progress. But I just thought I'd tell you about a couple of the things that have happened. This was a workshop with an artist called Katie Connor and some objects from RAMM's World Journeys Handling Collection. And the things that the children and the teacher felt were of interest and the artist were some hand-drawn maps and a Nigerian brass bird, a sort of cockerel. And the artist worked with the children. Some were very young, these were reception children, and there were some year fives, looking at the themes of kind of journeys and map making and space, and using these objects as a way into the kind of digital technology. They started with the objects and they moved on to making their own maps, but through that they looked at kind of GPS mapping and GPS drawing, looking at Google Earth and finding themselves. So the objects were a really useful way in to those feelings about those ideas about sort of locating yourself in space and viewing things from different perspectives. And the young people's creative work came out of that. So yes, that, as I said, the successes, the museum objects were really helpful in that sort of making things tangible. And they did come up with work that they would not have come up with before. What didn't fit into any of the kind of neat boxes about what a piece of artwork looked like. It was much more fluid and interesting about how what they wanted to do turned out to be a creative work. The challenges, of course, digital equipment in schools is a very complicated topic. Some have a lot, some have absolutely nothing. This particular school is at a very deprived situation and had really absolutely nothing. Shockingly nothing, actually. And the access to the museum collections, which is a lot of what today is about, and looking at things like Southwest Collections Explorer, this school wanted to use a handling collection, but the issues are not straightforward about how actually, as you know, getting young people in front of the objects or in front of the digital image of the objects. So there's a lot of work to be done there. The second one was with much older young people, and we worked with some handling objects from RAMM and also from Plymouth Museum, and a lot of the students got very interested in this miner's lamp. They had a theme to work on which was about location and dislocation and orientation and disorientation, and they started to look at the lamp in terms of something that would locate people in space and as a sort of lens through to other time. So this was this is a still from an animated GIF that one of the young people made, which I'm afraid I haven't managed to show you today, where they used the, they did some printing and they've used Photoshop and photography to sort of superimpose various images. What was interesting about these workshops is the young people's awareness that you could actually use museum objects as a starting point for creative work. I mean, it's something that we probably as professionals in this field might think is quite obvious, but the young people hadn't really, it wasn't a concept that they knew where to start with. They were often looking at Google and things when they were looking for starting points for work. They'd look at other artists, or they'd look at lots of Instagram images or Google images. They weren't thinking about going to a real object, and a historic object at that. Again, it is interesting, the thought, as has been discussed, how you get that young person to engage with an object sufficiently that they are moved to make a piece of creative work. And without a curator or somebody who can tell the stories, who can kind of bring that object to life, it's quite touch and go whether you get that connection from the young person to the object that allows them to start off doing something. So that's an interesting thing that we're going to address in the next phase of the project in terms of testing whether you use a digital-only resource, whether you use a handling collection, or whether you use a museum object, and how kind of supported that museum visit is in terms of the kind of depth of engagement you get for the young people's work. I'm aware we're running out of time, so I'll flick through those artists. That's another still from the GIF about that miner's lamp and the place. That's it. I was going to hand back over to Rick. Okay. Did you want to say something about?
Right. Well, just very briefly, we have got even more fun stuff going on the website. One of the things we're doing is we're creating some small widgets so people can grab a chunk of digital collection and import it into their own website, use it as a resource anywhere really using an internet-based technology. So that's a treat to come, but I'm not sure exactly when we're going to do that. Next couple of months. And I can see Martin is hovering near us, so I will be quiet now.